Hello, and welcome to John's Jam Sessions. I am your host, John. Shorter episode this week, a bit of a kind of short announcement from next week. Episodes are going to be released on Tuesdays. I've just decided to kind of change the release schedule. So I was just going to put out the short episode this week, just so I don't miss a week. We are going to get into some responses off one of the topics we spoke about last week on the guilty pleasures. Got quite a lot of responses off the Reddit, so I kind of wanted to read them out and give a bit of a reaction and go a bit deeper into that topic. But yeah, so from next week we will be getting episodes out on Tuesdays. Tuesday mornings they'll be out. Things are going to pretty much stay more or less the same. I'm going to keep trying to have guests on as many episodes as can. Obviously, it's not always possible to do. Also, if anyone's listening and would want to come on as a guest or something like that, I've been having a think and thinking about bringing on local bands and people more locally involved in music and interviewing them. So that is something. If you feel that's something that's up your alley, please get in touch. Get in touch with me on any of the socials. Basically, just search for the John's Jam Sessions on Facebook or whatever. Anyway, that's enough of that. So yeah, all you need to know is Tuesday next week you'll be getting an episode. So technically you're doing quite well here because you're getting quite a few episodes back to back. Just because I didn't want to make like a 2-minute podcast, I actually wanted to put some content in this. Last week we released our guilty pleasures. Me and Tom, we did our guilty pleasures, and one of the guilty pleasures that Tom brought up was the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Now the thing is with the Red Hot Chili Peppers is it's both band me and Tom are incredibly huge fans of, and I think the kind of message we were getting across is, despite our love for the band, there are sometimes occasions where bands that you love or bands that you have a really big interest in can come across as like a bit cringe and a bit embarrassing sometimes. I think these comments really get into a lot of the kind of stuff that I feel sometimes. So I'm just gonna go through them basically and just kind of give my reaction to them. Some kind of get buried in like replies and stuff. So I'm just gonna kind of read the top comment Redditor unless I kind of spot something on my way. Basically, I put the clip up of the podcast and I kind of posed the question to the Red Hot Chili Peppers subreddit of, do the chilies ever make you cringe? I was a bit worried about putting this up sometimes because, I wouldn't really want to say it's like negative exactly, but sometimes when you do start putting criticism towards bands in their subreddits, you can catch a bit of flack from it. Right, so Ham in the Frying Pan says, bet I would cringe way harder if the past 40 years of my life was well documented and I could see it all on YouTube. And obviously, that's kind of a good point, really, because when you are, especially like in music, musicians, so much of your life is documented and recorded and put on film that a lot of the stuff that we do in our private lives that to others may seem a bit embarrassing and cringe, that's out there for the world as well. Is at the end of the day, the Red Hot Chili Peppers are entertainers at heart. You're not always going to stick the landing when it comes to being entertaining and being interesting, as you can see when I do my podcast. Ramu Russia, I think that's what it's meant to be. As said, quite often it was a product of its time, but some of the old interviews haven't aged very well. Still my favourite band in the world, and I love them. The one thing I go to straight that comes straight to my mind with this comment is the DVD documentary Funky Monks, which is like a behind the scenes kind of making of documentary of Blood Sugar Sex Magic back in the early 90s. That is very. There's some very bizarre things that the band members come out with on that interview, and I don't think it's aged very well. See, they were all a lot younger. I know Anthony was sober at the time, but John Frusciante certainly wasn't, and some of the stuff that comes out of his mouth is pretty weird. MTINC says, reading Scar Tissue, there were a lot of cringe moments, especially from Anthony Kiedis, but other members of the band too. Again, autobiographies are like a subject all on their own. How much do you actually share with the world? I don't want. We ended up actually kind of like editing a bit from last week's podcast, kind of around some of the subjects that are brought up in that book. I don't really want to get too much into it, but I think Anthony Kiedis overshared a bit too much in that book. And what's the old saying? If you don't write something down, if you don't want people to know about it. Although he released it and published it as a book, so what can you do? Droison says the fans make me cringe more than the band. Yeah, again, this is something I will get into on like another podcast altogether. It's kind of like fandoms and like kind of the extremes of fandoms. I think one prime example at the moment is kind of like Taylor Swift and kind of like the Swifties and stuff like that. I think she latest album she just dropped previous week, the Tortured Poets Department, is pretty bad, to be honest. I'm not a fan of it at all. And this is someone coming from someone who actually does enjoy Taylor Swift and I do actually own some of her albums on vinyl. I thought it was quite weak. I thought it was probably at least their weakest release in quite some time. However, it's selling like mad. It's getting like rave reviews, and the fan base are like absolutely obsessed with it. And people who criticize it or speak out against it get quite a lot of backlash, and that's something I really hate from fan bases is when they go on the attack and it's like, listen, your favorite band or artist are doing fine. They don't need you to be fighting their battles, and they probably don't want you fighting their battles either. So just kind of take a step back there. But that was a bit of a side tangent to get back into the Red Hot Chili Peppers and really know how to respond to that because I've not really had too much exposure from a lot of other fans to really determine if they're cringe or not. I think most fan bases do have an element of cringe to them, to be honest. Dr. Glass85 says, Mummy, Where's Daddy is pretty weird. That's one of the like early songs, isn't it? To be honest, and I actually put this on the Reddit myself. I can see it now. Actually, I got like 19 downvotes. I basically said anything before Mother's Milk, in my opinion, I just kind of don't really like acknowledge or listen to. I kind of see the band as a completely different band before kind of Frusciante and Chad joined. And I got a bit of backlash for that, but that's just like, them early albums, they really are something else. I think there was a lot of things that needed kind of ironing out and tightening up a bit in that period. Mike Mickelson, sorry, I'm really sorry if I'm messing up these names, says, isn't that why we love the band? I love the childish joy that they bring. I think that's a really good comment. At the end of the day, the Red Hot Chili Peppers for me have always been a band for kind of escapism for me. When you're getting kind of too bogged down in the world and all the problems in the world, the Red Hot Chili Peppers are kind of separate from that. And I kind of find their music sometimes to be, I think Tom said in the last episode that it's a bit dated, but I have to disagree. I think sometimes it can come across timeless because the topics aren't like very topical and in the moment, and they don't really get too much into like politics or anything like that. So I do enjoy the escapism. I do enjoy them for their quirks and their kind of like quirky behaviour. But I think sometimes it can just be a bit too. As I say, when you're an entertainer, not everything's gonna hit, is it? Not everything's gonna land. You can fire everything at the wall, and not everything's gonna stick, is it? So you do have to give them some slack. KM Urges says, I think AK will ways be underrated because of what he does is compared to the pure technical musical ability of the other three. But it's music, it's not sport. He has an instinctive performer which does lead itself to the dumb material at times, admittedly. John and Flea have played with the best musicians in the world and have a lot of respect for what he does. If you take him out of the band that you love, wouldn't be the band that you love. I'm sorry, bit of a struggle reading that, to be honest, mate. I know where you're coming from, though. I understand what you're saying. John Frusciante is an absolute phenomenal guitarist, one of my favourite guitarists, top guitarists out there, full stop. Flea, I don't even know where to begin with Flea. He is my core musical influence. Obviously, I am a bass player as well. And, if it weren't for Flea, I wouldn't have been as much of a devoted bass player as I am today. Chad's drumming, again, is just brilliant. Of course, Anthony Kiedis, the least kind of like musically talented out of the band. But I think what he does is just works fine. I don't have too much criticism. I do have criticisms. Obviously, I do have criticisms, but I don't have too much. I think what he does in is vocal range and his melodies and all that is absolutely fine. And I couldn't really ask for much more, really, from him. Okay, so this is one that kind of got brought up a bit. This song, Dusty Horse 31. Humpty Bump was almost terminal for me. Now, this is a song that I think is quite hated in the kind of Chili Pepper fan community. I don't hate it as much as some people do. I really don't. It's silly, it's goofy. Does it kind of take a bit away out of Stadium Arcadium and disrupt the flow? 100% yes. It's not a worst song in the world, but yeah, I agree. It's kind of like, would you put that on in a social setting? Would you put that on in like some kind of like house party or gathering of any sort, or is that a skip? I think to me, it's a bit of a skip, as it is to many people. There is a comment under that from Dr. Class 85 again that says, I don't mind the song, but for some reason the background vocal saying, "Oh no!" I'm pretty sure that was cringe. That always irritates me. Yeah, like it is kind of that. It's that there are a lot of elements in the song that I just kind of push me away from enjoying the song too much. Can't have too much nice things to say about Humpty Bump, to be honest. Hey, well, I think it's Haley, but what 4 Lee 20. Anthony is the only one who ever makes me cringe. And the only song I won't play to introduce someone to the band is Psycho Sexy. I have no explanation for that lady cop interaction that that ensued. Now, I know what you're talking about there. If anyone isn't aware the song Psycho Sexy, I would recommend checking it out for yourself and forming your own opinion. But I think the reoccurring theme that is definitely coming up here on reading these comments is there's one member of the band in particular that is coming up quite regularly. I did say last week on the Guilty Pleasures episode that Flea can be a bit too much for me sometimes. I know he's kind of like a wacky, zany kind of dude, but sometimes it just comes across as a bit too much. It's kind of one of them with a band I like so much. I'd love to get like as much info out of them as I could, and as much like behind the scenes, and I want to hear about the music and stuff. But I think whenever I've listened to a Flea interview, he kind of just spirals on and starts talking about like kind of more like stuff on a spiritual side and that kind of hippy dippy kind of element to it. I kind of just want to get into kind of like the meat and potatoes of it, really. I just want to hear them talking about, how they came up with the songs, how they came up with the riffs and stuff like that, which he does do from time to time. I have heard some good interviews where he's talked about how songs are formed and been created and stuff like that. Hell yeah, Tiny Rick says, Poster Child sounds like everything they are parodying themselves, but they're actually dead serious. Poster Child came off Unlimited Love, one of the last two albums that came out, the John Frusciante big comeback albums. I remember when it came out because it was, I believe, was it the second song to kind of be released before Unlimited Love came out? And I wasn't impressed, and I did kind of think, yeah, this is pretty much what people who don't really like the Chili Peppers say about the Chili Peppers, that they don't really kind of like that rapping style or the nonsensical lyrics or just that kind of cheesy kind of funk. I would have to agree with that. Post Child is not one of my favourites, to be honest. One of the comments under this, though, I've just spotted Chicken Curry and Chips, good name. Post Child is a great song. Tip of My Tongue sounds like a skit where someone is parodying the band. I love the two new albums, but Tip of My Tongue, and in brackets, I'll get downvoted to oblivion for this. The lyrics to Bella make me cringe. Luckily, mate, you've not been downvoted that badly there. You're still on 3 upvotes. Tip of My Tongue, I really liked that song when it came out. I think it felt, bouncy and fun, and I quite enjoyed it, but it is not a song I've gone back to very often and listened to. There are elements I like in it, and then there's elements I kind of don't like in it. I think Bella's the same. I think that album as a whole, the Return of the Dream Canteen, the lyrics are really off on that album, and it got picked up on quite a bit by a lot of the reviews and a lot of the critics. It feels very first draft, and we get into an issue really where it becomes like quantity over quality. Definitely one of the aspects of that, really kind of too much. I would have just preferred one album with the best songs out of both of them albums put into one, and then we would have had a really solid, great album rather than two pretty good albums. We can get into that in another time. Funny enough, I was speaking about that. Ready underscore peanut 7062 says, unfortunately, Return of the Dream Canteen is a cringe fest for me. There is a lot in that album that really kind of makes you pull that face, that like, what? What did he just say? What's this song about? What? Bella a dog? Bella a dog? Bella must be a dog. Can't be a woman. Bella's a dog. Yeah. I completely agree. It's like the last song, In the Snow. I thought that song was great when I was listening to it. Oh, it really perked me up. I was like, oh, I'm interested. I'm invested in this song. And then he starts going into the spoken poetry, and I kind of sank back down again. And I'm like, no, Anthony, no, stop. Chunky but funky. But he's put X's where the U's should be. Says, not them as a whole, but some years ago, Flea put something out into the universe via social media, saw it on Instagram, where he was talking about something. I don't recall what it was or even the topic, but he was putting on makeup and some really weird face paint. It was the only time in my entire life that I can recall thinking, what the actual fuck are you doing? It felt so weird and too much of I've always been free, wild spirit, still at this age. I don't know. It was just a bit too random for me, and that image has never left my mind. I think, again, I kind of got kind of into my little gripes with Flea and stuff, but I think part of it is like a generational issue, and just how like people of an older generation kind of use and go about themselves on social media like differently to younger ones, and often it kind of comes across very bizarre. Strange. Yeah. That is a bit cringe. Again, quite a few just about Anthony Kiedis once again. Someone said it was cringe from the podcast. It's been deleted now, so I don't know if he deleted it or someone else did. But thanks for everyone there who gave me a bit of support for that. I'm gonna crack on, keep going with it. You know what I mean? Catholic Schoolgirls Rule, again, another track from the older era that I don't really go into. No, that's off Mother's Milk, isn't it? Is that off Mother's Milk? I haven't listened to Mother's Milk in such a long time. Yeah, we don't have to talk too much about that. That is cringe. Sorry, that was from Something or Another 22. Stormy Kun says, it's not even the singing in seeing them live and then next to never interacting with the crowd and the fans. Saw them 3 times in Texas the past 2 years. Not once did he give off the vibe of we're on the clock. I get it, it's a job, but fuck. This definitely, again, I feel like there's so much I can kind of get into, but this was intended to be a short episode. I will be doing episodes about kind of gigs and tours and bands and live performances and stuff. So if you're interested in that, if anyone's like, please, stick around and wait out for future episodes, because I will definitely be getting into topics like that. Okay, here's an interesting one. I think I will leave it here because I think this has ran on for long enough now. But this is a topic I'd like to talk. Again, I'd probably like to have Tom here for some of these topics because we could really get into these. Funeral Hymn 123 says, makes me cringe when John acts like a baby and won't play anything except for the same 20-something songs. Now, I don't agree with the same 20-something songs. I think if you're referring to kind of like the set lists, I think the set lists have always been a bit of a struggle for me, and they always kind of pick too much out of the greatest hit. I think that every now and again, at various gigs, they do actually pull out some deep cuts, but I think what you're referring to, and I think what a lot of people think when this comes up, is the fact that John Frusciante will not play anything that he did not perform on, unless a very rare exception from the earlier albums. He won't play anything off One Hot Minute, and he won't play anything off the 2 long ago released albums, I'm With You and The Getaway. Again, I really could get into this, and I think we will on another episode, but we'll have a bit of a chat about it now. So this really kind of gets into like this interesting topic of how does it feel to play other people's music? How does it feel to kind of be out of the band and for them to keep making music? Now, the problem with John Frusciante in that instance is he every time left the band. And I think he kind of got a bit sulky and a bit moody that they decided to kind of carry on without him, especially during the Josh era. I don't think that was right. I don't think that's the right attitude to have. Again, he's not very open on these topics, and he is a bit cagey, and you don't really hear much from it. But I think one of the main things I was interested in when he came back into the band was, what did he think of the I'm With You and the Getaway? What did he think of the Josh era albums? And of course, his response was, "Oh, I haven't listened to them." That's probably true, but part of me just really doubts that. Like, I just find that so hard to believe. Like, everyone has that curiosity, and like, if I was in his shoes, I would be so curious to kind of listen and hear what was going on. Sometimes people say that as a kind of a polite way of not wanting to say that they don't like it or they don't enjoy the music or anything like that. That does happen. Again, with John, he's so kind of like elusive and stuff like that. It's kind of hard to know exactly if he has or hasn't listened to the music. I think he has. I'm pretty sure he would have. He was gone for about, what, near a decade? And at no point did he, like, not even like famous, big, well known person, probably doesn't get out in public much, but, at no point was he not exposed to at least any of the lead singles from them albums or anything like that, or someone played something in front of him or anything like that. I don't believe it. So he kind of has this rule that we all have to kind of, sit down and accept, that he won't play any of the Josh era stuff or the 1 Hot Minute stuff. I think part of me is a bit sad about that, because I do think out of that Josh era, that there were some very good songs. It's kind of sad that they'll kind of be lost to time in a way. We'll never really get to hear them live again, stuff like that. I do get that. It does. It is a bit sad. Also, it would have been interesting to kind of hear John's take on some of them songs, but what can you do? You've got to kind of respect, what his kind of wishes and desires. But at the same time, that does kind of, what one thing I have an issue with John is, I always feel so anxious about him, if that makes sense. I'm always worrying when you're seeing like promotional stuff or anything that the Chili's are doing. I'm always panicking, and I'm looking at John going, does John look happy? Does he look happy? Because he's got such a form for leaving on the spot, off the cusp, and especially after Stadium Arcadium, they're like one of their greatest works, after such a solid run of the band, that he just walked out on them again. You're like, he's back now, but you don't feel like you're out of the woods yet. You know what I mean? You don't feel like you're safe. And he's there to stay. For all we know, the return of the Dream Canteen is the last album. It could be. You just don't know. He seems a bit very no. He's never liked the limelight. He's never liked being in the spotlight. One of the reasons he left in the early '90s was because of how big they were getting and how he couldn't handle that. You've got to respect that. You've got to understand that. But at the same time, it comes with the job. You know what I mean? It does come with the job, and part of you has to kind of accept that. So yeah, with John, I'm always so happy to kind of see him back and enjoy him, and I love that he is the Chili Peppers. The Chili Peppers are he is integral to the band. We will get into the Josh stuff. That's an upcoming episode. We're going to get right into all this, don't worry. But because he's so integral and such an important member of the band, I do panic a little bit, and I do worry, and I get a bit like stressed. And I think, going back to that comment, like, it's kind of like, it is a bit baby behavior, isn't it? It is a bit like spitting your dummy out the pram, and it's kind of like, keep me happy and do what I want, or I'll leave again kind of attitude. And at the end of the day, that's just kind of what we can kind of gather or see from things. We, behind the scenes, everything might just be cool and chill. Maybe the other band members just don't really think much of the Josh era songs and don't want to play them. You just don't know. So thanks for all the responses and comments. I'll try and go through and find you on Reddit and link you to the episode. Hopefully you'll be glad that you've been given a bit of a mention and a shout out. So I'm going to wrap this up now. Nice, short, sweet one, but don't worry, there's more episodes coming very soon. Next episode, hopefully, if everything goes smoothly, we'll finally see the return of Mike, and we'll be getting right into the Korn albums from the first album all the way up to Take a Look in the Mirror. Me and Tom have plenty more ideas on the horizon, and I've got a few more people I'm talking to at the moment for guest slots. So there's lots coming to the podcast. So if you could, please give me a follow on Spotify. Please rate it 5 stars. Please follow me on all my social medias. Please give us feedback. Give us your comments, thoughts, concerns. All that jazz. I really will take it on board unless you're just calling me names, and then I'll just have a cry. I won't. I might. We'll see. It depends how harsh you are, really. Anyway, that's going to do it for today. So thanks for listening, and I will see you on Tuesday, hopefully.